So let's say they come in under the cover of midnight into Kansas City, St. Louis, wherever around the country they're coming.
Right.
Do we at least keep track of these people?
Well, we're supposed to.
Okay.
They're supposed to be monitored. But oftentimes when they get here and they're dropped off by the volunteers, whoever's picking them up from the airport and taking them to their place of residency, once they're there, some have left that and moved on, or they've just vanished. We don't know where they are. We have no idea. We don't know if they've even crossed state lines or not. We did hear that some of them crossed over into Illinois, and they're supposed to check in with the agency that processed them. But
oh, you and I both know that's not happening.
sure, no.
And the reality is there's nothing that keeps them from crossing over either.
Right.
It's not like we have fences between Missouri and Illinois. You make it across, you're in Illinois.
Right. And if they're not staying in the home or the residence where they were placed, how are they receiving their funds? How are they receiving their benefits? Well, they get just like anybody here in America that's on, say, food stamps, you get an electronic banking card, and that's how you get your food at the grocery store. And so your cash, again, is on a card. And so and your Medicaid card. So once they've obtained these items, they can live pretty much anywhere they want to live. And there's no way really to track down where they're coming from.
And I would assume that once it's under the Wilson Fish program, that's even harder to keep track of.
Well, I would imagine it would be, because Wilson Fish, like right now, under Missouri state law, if you and I wanted to Freedom of Information request documents on these people, and I have, then by law they have to send us those documents. Sometimes they'll assign a dollar amount for copy fees,
Sure.
or looking for them or what have you, but you can obtain those documents. If this program, the Wilson Fish program, were to come in and override the sovereignty of our state and this fall into third-party hands, we've lost all ability to know any information.
So how prevalent is the Wilson Fish thing? Because a lot of people are thinking, well, if I can just get my governor and my legislature to say, we don't want the refugees, we'll be like Tennessee and Texas, and yeah, the feds will sue us, but stand behind my governor.
Mm-hmm.
But the Wilson Fish thing circumvents that whole process.
Right.
How prevalent is Wilson Fish?
We only have a few states right now that have implemented Wilson Fish.
Okay.
Yeah, I think by and large most of the states are similar to ours in that they want to maintain and retain sovereignty over the process. So, but honestly, there are people out there who are fighting for us to become a Wilson Fish state.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
That's just insane. So the people come off the airplane looking for a new place to get free stuff, new name, new identity, and I'm sure they're all peaceful and friendly, unlike the ones that we're seeing in Europe. Have there been any cases where even the people who are driving them to their destination have felt a little uneasy about what's happening?
Sure. One of the directors in one of the meetings that I attended said he wasn't going to go pick them up from the airport anymore. He'd made several pickups, and he told a story in one of the meetings that he had picked up a van full of Syrians and all males, and he had a couple-hour drive ahead of him to get them to the city where they were going to be relocating. Well, they started yelling at him in the van. They started threatening him, and he felt like his life was in danger. So he pulled the van over.
Wow.
He was not going to finish transporting them, but he couldn't get anybody to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to
Sure.
come and get them. Because it's 2 o'clock in the morning
Sure.
in the middle of winter. So he ended up finishing the drive and getting them placed, but it scared him enough to swear off ever doing it again. He wasn't going to pick up anymore.
Now, the progressive media doesn't understand that Islam and Muslim is not a race. They think if you're anti-Islam, you're a racist or something.
Mm-hmm.
But just from an Islamic perspective, are we seeing that mosques in some of these bigger cities, St. Louis, Kansas City, are they working with these organizations to bring these people in or house them or feed them or at least pick up part of the bill?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't seen any involvement from any of these Islamic organizations, such as CARE.
Sure.
I haven't seen any involvement from any of them at all.
Wow. When you look at Europe,
Mm-hmm.
when you see how Sweden tried to deny that they were having violent problems, and then every day since the denial,
Right.
it's getting worse.
Right.
Grenades, rapes, it's insane.
Right.
When you look at what's happening to Europe, and you hear people here in America say, well, that's not going to happen here. We're different. What do you think when you hear that?
I think people are believing mainstream media, and I would caution viewers that are watching this right now to be very careful. Mainstream media is lying to us. They're not telling us the truth. I've got a couple of cases that I can cite as examples.
Sure.
I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee last summer, and I was down there for some meetings. And the day after I left, the shooting took place in Chattanooga. And you may recall that the shooter was Islamic. He was a Muslim, and he shot the recruiting offices there in a strip mall. It happened to be right next door to the restaurant that I had had dinner at the night before.
Whoa.
So I think that's an example of the malevolent intent of these Muslims. Another example I would give you is a friend of mine they live in Texas. Their 20-year-old son was coming home from college. He was stopped at a traffic light just a few short blocks from home, coming home for the weekend, very close to home, and a car of refugees pulls up next to him at the stoplight and shoots him and kills him.
Whoa.
So, you know, in my opinion, this is a very serious and dangerous situation.
Sure.
Because they've not been vetted, and we don't understand we don't know what they're planning or what their intent is. But we know enough to know. We've got enough examples here in the United States to know that this is really a serious problem. You know, the young lady that was shot walking with her father on the wharf in San Francisco just a couple of years ago. I mean, we've got quite a few examples of refugees who came in and illegally and through this process. I hesitate to call this process legal because to me it's circumventing so many laws.
You were saying that the governors, the legislators, they don't know what's going on. They're being kept from this. These refugees are coming in at midnight. Who does know? Does President Trump know this is happening and he's allowing this? Or are they keeping it from him too?
No, President Trump is very aware.
Okay.
And I'm very grateful for that. He knows exactly. If you'll recall, during the campaign season, he actually mentioned this during his campaign, which gave me confidence in him that he must know something. And I believe he does know, simply by virtue of the fact that he has slowed down the influx coming in. He really kind of slammed on the brakes in February. On January 27th, he put the 120-day travel ban in place. That all those things tell me that he's aware of the danger. And so I believe, and he also came out publicly recently and said that he's going to implement extreme vetting. Now, what does extreme vetting look like? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. Under the 1980 Act that Jimmy Carter signed, refugees could be identified as refugees versus immigrants under 3 conditions. If they were fleeing religious persecution, if they were fleeing from a war-torn country, if they were caught in the middle of a war-torn country, or if they were fleeing from a natural disaster, a tsunami, earthquake, asteroid, something like that. All right. When these refugees are coming over, they should be asked or categorized according to one of those 3 criteria. And the first one is religious persecution. And so these Muslims that are coming over, the refugees, are primarily Muslim. So when the news comes out and says, well, we don't need to know whether they're Muslim or Christian or what they are, well, we kind of do.
Yeah.
Because if they're not being persecuted for being a Muslim, they don't meet the criteria to come.
Right.
And so that would be called extreme vetting.
It's interesting you mentioned extreme vetting because that's one of the possible solutions. But what else can we do? I mean, let's say somebody's listening. Odds are they don't live at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They don't have stars on their shoulder.
Right.
What can we do?
Well, I think first of all, arm yourself with information. You know, I don't recommend everybody try to go to these UN refugee resettlement meetings because frankly it's not practical. But I do think it is a good idea to arm yourself with this information. I'm sharing with you and with these listeners information that you're just not going to pick up and find in a newspaper.
Right.
And so you need to find out the information, particularly as it pertains to your state. And you need to meet with some of your lawmakers. I have met with, we're here at the Missouri State Capitol today, and I have met with the Homeland Security Committee of our General Assembly here. And I testified in executive session and gave them much of this information, backing up the things that I'm sharing with you with the documents that were handed to me in the meetings. So they had really good information that was current and up to date, and they could see the numbers, see how many dollars were coming in, see how many dollars were being spent, and how many refugees were coming in. So I would suggest to people who are listening, if you're watching this, you know, make every effort to go out and find those numbers. I got a lot of the information from Missouri Social Services website. You can get your state plan off of your state's Social Services website. At the bottom of our front page, it simply says Missouri State Plan. I printed it out. It was a PDF. I printed it out and I went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I would encourage people to do that and then make a list. I had no idea that they were being given Social Security numbers and passports.
Yeah, that's insane.
Well, I felt the same way. When I was sitting in the meeting, I was shocked. You know, I wrote this down, I highlighted it, and I was just sitting there thinking, am I the only person in the room that has a problem with this? You know, apparently I was. You know, so when you find these things out, if you are shocked by it, chances are a whole lot of other people are going to be shocked by it too.
Yeah, because this is something that I've been following for years, but I had no clue that they were getting Social Security numbers and passports.
Right.
That takes us to a whole nother level, which leads to the next question. What do you think the end game is? Why do you think this is happening?
Well, I would tie it back to the UN protocol for Agenda 2030.
Okay.
And Clinton, Bill Clinton, when he was president in 1992, he committed the United States to what was then called Agenda 21. Agenda 21. It's changed names. I'm trying to keep up with all the variations of this name. So he committed the United States to Agenda 21 when under his presidency, and then today they've changed the name to Agenda 2030 because they believe and desire to have full implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in place by 2030. Well, that's just what 13 years from now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so part of that agenda is dropping national borders.
Sure.
No more borders. It is really a one world government system. That's the end game.
Do you think Trump's going to be successful in the time that he has, given the fact that the Republicans don't seem to be moving at all? And it's almost like they want to stalemate this thing, just give him 3.5 years, get him out, and move on with the agenda?
I would say that, first of all, we need to pray. I'm a person of deep prayer, a person of faith. I believe in that, and I think it's very important that we do pray. We need to pray for him because there are people out there that even as we're sitting here are trying to get him out of office by one way or another. And so we need to support him. If you tweet, I would encourage you to get on Twitter. He tweets all day long.
Yeah, he does.
And I love it, you know. I just love that he does that because he's bypassing fake news.
Right.
And so we're hearing firsthand, straight from him, what's going on, and I love that. And I love the ability that we have now to tweet back or to respond to his tweets, which he pays attention to. So I think there's some things there that make him unique in his presidency that no other president has really taken advantage of. You know, President Obama did some Facebooking and he did some tweeting, but not to the degree that President Trump has made this his main way of communicating with the American people. So I think we need to get behind him and support him. I think we need to pray for him. I also think that when we find things out, we need to do just like what I'm doing today. We need to sound the alarm. We need to let people know. You know, the American people have long enjoyed what we call American exceptionalism.
Yeah.
And the world and some of the liberal ideologists want to shame us about that. They want to say to us, well, that's just white privilege. First of all, it has nothing to do with the color of your skin. It has nothing to do with the fact with being privileged. It has to do with the fact that we are U.S. citizens born in a sovereign nation that enjoys freedom. And it's freedom and liberty that we're really fighting for. And so when you realize that you're about to lose the standard of living in which you're accustomed, and you're about to lose your ability to live freely with liberty, then it burns, it starts a fire under you. You get a fire lit under you. And I've seen up close and personal how dangerously close we've come to losing those very freedoms and liberties. And so I think those things, are some practical things that we can do, and certainly let our local officials know, our local elected officials know how we feel. One of the things that I've taken note about with President Trump is how often he's meeting with the governors of each state, and even with some of the senators and congressmen or state representatives from each state. He's really wanting and seeking answers. He wants to know the truth. I believe he's on a fact-finding mission, and I believe he's ultimately going to get the truth.